Host of the Tony Casillas Show podcast, College Football Hall of Famer, former Oklahoma great, partnered with the Cowboys in Super Bowls as well, Tony Casillas on 365 Sports with Paul Craig and David Smoak. Tony, what do you think the mood is today in Norman?
Oh, first of all, thanks for having me, guys. It's always great to be on with the greatness of Waco, Texas. That's a great question. That's a great question. I think that I think a lot of people were somewhat shocked what happened in Fort Worth. I think that part of me kind of saw some vulnerability against Kansas State, but I know Oklahoma struggled with a quarterback that could scramble. They had some issues on their defense. Really kind of played soft at times, and then offensively there really wasn't that spark. But I think there's a lot of uncertainty. You don't know if your quarterback's probably going to be out this weekend because of concussion protocol, and so then you have to lean on some guys that have never played. So I think right now, I think they're just trying to get some mojo back, find some answers, and it's a quick turnaround. I know as a player you have a lot to go into game plan, but the one thing that's good about this week, it's Texas. So I know that emotions and everything that goes along with that can uplift you, but man, they got to fix it. They need to fix it fast because Texas. We say I feel like we say it a lot here lately, but I think this year they're playing to a level that maybe we haven't seen, but in that game, who knows? But I know that's a long answer, but I think. In the short version is let's find some identity, and we need to focus on the simpler things and fundamentals of the game.
A new coaching staff, 42 new players on the roster. This is not easy for anyone to do, no matter if you're Oklahoma or not. Is this part of this because they don't know how to work through adverse situations together because they're all still getting to know each other?
Yeah, I think when you got a new coach and Brent Venables, a new offensive defensive coordinator, you got different players that another the coach brought in. I know there's some learning curves there. I think last week when they were trying to do kind of a 3-man front, 4-man front, I think they're out of sorts because really I just don't think you have the personnel to run that type of defense with 3 down. But I think there's some familiarity there, but I think that sometimes I think coaches have a tendency to get a little too fancy and try to dial up different calls, and I think you just got to go back to simplifying it, because if you're trying to force something that's not there with your personnel, then that's pretty much what's going to happen. You're not going to have the results, and honestly, you lose a lot of confidence in your players because they just don't. They're trying the best they can, but you're trying to put them in a situation where that doesn't work for them. So I think, for me, I think for them especially is that they just need to make it simpler, make it basic. I think you can't play soft. You have to play aggressive. You can't have a lot of information swimming in your head, and just kind of play yourself through it. And I think that's what Oklahoma has to do is try to find that. And if they get that, I think they'll be more sound. And they won't be searching for answers to some of the unanswered questions.
Tony, there are answers that can be found, and there are some things that might have to wait until the offseason. But right now, when it comes to this defense, or if it's a non-defensive thing that sticks out overall, what is your biggest concern at the moment?
Well, I think that when you watch them against TCU, I think that they were a little soft in their alignment. I think TCU, they just got all over them. And then I think that the reactionary and what they needed to do to try to, to adjust. Anytime you got a team that gets up on you like that, and then you lose your quarterback, and then there's this panic mode. I think that they were just, trying too hard. And honestly, they may not have the personnel that they need. And right. I think this is going to happen with the transfer portal. You look at Kansas and Kansas State. Who would have thought 2 teams from Kansas would be leading the Big 12? Kansas is 5-0. That's a big story in the Big 12. And then you look at Texas, you look at Baylor, you look at Oklahoma. Just haven't found it. So I think there's a lot of combination of things. But I think for me, I think this is going to be the way it's going to be. And especially when you have a coach that left and a lot of players left with them, sometimes it's kind of adapt to what you have when you have this philosophy when you get there. But I think that's really there's no excuses. I mean, when you're Oklahoma, you're not supposed to get beat by a TCU. They're not supposed to put a half 100 on you. That's unheard of. So I think a lot to go is on the coaches and a lot the players especially. But ultimately, you look at these teams that are really good, that have 3 or 4 really good athletes, or 4 athletes. 1 or 2 is going to be from the transfer portal. So anyone can be competitive every Sunday. And I think Oklahoma has kind of found that out early in these last 2 games.
You mentioned that kind of brought up the fact it's Texas week, Texas OU, and we know the emotions there. But with the transfer portal the way it is now, both teams have brought in a bunch of new people. Will it have the same type of emotional edge that this series has always had?
Well, Smoak, yeah, I think it depends on what type of players you bring in. I know with Quentin Evers, I know you have Hudson Card, who is, you don't know who's going to be the quarterback this week, but I think what I heard is that Hudson Card was actually playing better in the spring. But when you're paying a guy $1 million, then he's going to play. But I think that's the way it is. That's going to be the norm in college football, because every team's going to bring different players in, but it just depends on which player adapts to the offensive, especially the quarterback. And I think it's the patience that you used to be able to have. I think that's going to be kind of lost in the transition part of it, or translation, because there's so many things are changing. And you know, those guys that you bring in, the quarterbacks especially, they're going to show up and they're going to play, and they're going to make, 2 or 3 different skill players here or there. They're going to adjust. But, maybe Oklahoma, I think that they're, they brought in Dylan Gabriel, but I've watched him play, and he may or may not be the guy that they thought he would be. But, you have to replace someone, especially after you leave someone like Caleb Williams.
Tony Casillas, former Oklahoma College Football Hall of Famer, current College Football Hall of Famer, former Cowboys and Falcons defensive lineman, with us on 365 Sports.
Tony, I know that the transfer portal did, they got rated in the transfer portal, but are you surprised at even still, outside of Marvin Mims and maybe a couple other guys, that they still didn't have that depth, some of those playmakers just sitting there waiting for their shot now that some of those guys were gone?
Well, I think that you kind of got to play through that. And I think when you're a new coach and you really don't know the guys that are already there, then you bring guys that you have familiarity with, and they know you know them. But still, you have to build somewhat through the players you already have there. And this transfer portal has just gotten crazy, where you got to reload like 10 or 12 players every year. Those guys got to be athletes. And I don't know. I just don't. Maybe they don't have the personnel. Maybe they don't. They're deep, like you mentioned, the depth of the defensive line, and I think our secondary has really struggled, and it could be a long day for us if we don't fix that, because TCU just exploited that, and that was coming off the Kansas State loss. And so I think you have to find players that are there, and you got to develop them. And obviously, guys you bring in, it's got to be a mixed bag. But, 2 or 3 guys have really got to vault the other guys. And that's like your quarterback. It's like any skilled player. It's the same thing on defense. And I think, Venables is noted for that. He's a defensive guy. But I think that if you're a Sooner fan, you just got to tap the brakes. They like winners. The sky's not falling. But after 2 losses like that, TCU putting 55 on it, I think a lot of people, their patience get a little thin.
Yeah, no doubt. Yeah. I mean, especially when you're living so good for so long, like Oklahoma has been year in and year out. Is there, not try to get too far ahead here, Tony, but, just looking at kind of the instant reaction world we're in and seeing where they are now. And of course, there's the big SEC move in sometime in the next couple of years. On your part, is there any concern of oh man, are we biting off a bit more than we can chew? Or is it still just, hey, we're Oklahoma, we're going to compete no matter where we are, and we're going to be just fine?
Oh, absolutely. I think that was my biggest concern when they made that decision. I think that you're seeing these players. I think last week they had a defensive lineman flip on them to go to A&M, and I think that's just by way of just the deep pockets of A&M and does Oklahoma. Do they have enough money to pay these players? And yeah, I think it's something. It's going to be a big taste of reality playing these SEC teams, and you're struggling with Kansas State. You're struggling with all the teams in Big 12. Big 12 is a good conference, but if you want to go play big boy football, you want to make big boy money, this is going to be the growing pains. And I just very guarded cautiously against that, because that's something that be careful what you wish for. Yeah, the revenue stream's going to come in. The pockets are going to get filled at Oklahoma, but at what cost? And maybe in a couple of years, maybe they can get through some of this. But teams like Oklahoma aren't supposed to go through these growing pains, and they lose, but not like they lost against TCU. And maybe that's a little overreaction, but when it becomes an SEC, that's really kind of the way that it's trending. SEC is a big boy football league, and I tell you, every week you got to be ready to roll your sleeves up, and you better get ready to get hit in the face, because they're going to bring it.
How ironic is it that during all this transition of whenever the heck they eventually do join the SEC, this week's got 4 games, and the one game that does not have a ranked team in the Big 12 is Texas and OU.
I saw that, and to me, I think that's it kind of loses its luster a little bit. I know as a player, I think a lot of people they may not believe this, but I know as a player, when you're playing for 1 and 2 and you're playing for something's on the line, yeah, it's a big football game, without a doubt. It's one of the best, I think, rivalry games in college football. But when you're out there and you're playing for something, 1 against 2, you're in the top 10, and there's a lot of things that you have, there's a lot at stake. And even for the fans, it's not anticlimactic, but it really, you kind of understand it. And you're playing at 11 a.m., that's the game that's been, which is a different story. But yeah, I think it really, it starts to register a little bit, because here you are, Oklahoma, and you're not even ranked. And so I think it's still got the luster of a tremendous rivalry game. But I know as a player, to me, it means a lot more when there's a lot more at stake. Yeah, those guys are going to go out there and play their ass off. I mean, it's OU versus OU, Texas OU. The fans and the alumni, yeah, we're going to talk smack, but it's hard to stick your chest out when both teams aren't even ranked.
Jeff Ward just put this up on our chat room. First time since 1998 that's happened.
Yeah, I saw that. And if you lose to a Kansas State team, you lose to a TCU team, and then you look at Texas getting beat by Tech. Look, I think that Texas too has a lot in this too, because Texas, yeah, I mean they are who they are. They are a very financially a humongous entity, but what drives them is their athletic program and going to the SEC, and for them to play so great against Alabama and get beat by Texas Tech. It's kind of taking that step back again. So, yeah, I think it's hard. Yeah, you're going to go to the game, and all week we're all OU alumni are going to be talking smack. But yeah, to not be ranked in the top 25 since 1998, that stings a little bit.
I have one Cowboys question before we're done, but go ahead, Craig.
Yeah, I just want to ask you, Tony. I mean, forget all of the, where the teams are right now. This is still OU, Texas, like you said. There will be, thousands and thousands, going to the Cotton Bowl this weekend, and there will be millions watching at home. When you think of your time playing Texas, what is kind of the first thing that maybe comes into mind for you?
I would say an out-of-body experience, something that it's in a regular season game that you won't ever see until you have the opportunity or just to play in a championship game, and it's nuts. The ends, the 50-yard line from one side to the other is transitions from hatred to people loving you. And it's just crazy how the emotion in this game really takes over. I mean, look at the game last year. Texas was up by 28, and look what happened to them. The crowd got Oklahoma back in. Crazy things happened. And I think it's the best thing. It's crazy. The craziness happens in that game. And Texas is a 6-point favorite going in. Shoot, I wouldn't even worry about that because you can just you throw that out of the window because that doesn't apply to this game because it is crazy atmosphere.
Before you get to the Cowboys question, Paul, you were at 5 games. You were a player at Oklahoma. UT won twice, Oklahoma won twice. But the game that I always remember that might have been one of the more frustrating losses, or a tie, was the 84 game. Was that not when there was a pass interference call in the right corner of the end zone that just everybody, if you're an OU fan, or player, you lost your mind?
What's crazy is that is you get older, you have a propensity to maybe forget things, but you never forget games like that. That's kind of the ripping the scab off, the wound. And, for me, that was a crazy game that when you go back and watch it, we should have won 3 times over. The goal line stand, and then Keith Stanberry intercepting the pass 3 yards in the end zone, and they called him out. But that's that game. I mean, Todd Dodge was the starting quarterback. It was just in those type of games. Look, I always tell kids. I said a lot of you guys may have the chance to go play in the NFL. You can get paid money in the NIL, but you won't ever get a chance of playing a game like that. If you happen to play in a national championship, go on to your career. But that game within itself, without those things on the line, whether you're going to go on and play for something that's more meaningful, it doesn't get any better than that. But yeah, just what you mentioned, a game like that, and they show it. They show all these old games, and it's not high definition, but it's high definition enough to see that Keith Stanberry intercepted that pass, and we should have won, and it should have been a 15-15 tie game.
Yeah, I remember that very, very like it was yesterday. Paul?
Tony, the Cowboys are 3-1, due in large part because of their defense. Yesterday, they made Carson Wentz regret maybe ever deciding to play football as a profession, just getting after him that much. Just as someone who played the defensive line for that long, what's it like to be in games like that where you know that you're in the quarterback's head as soon as the whistle sounds?
Well, I think whenever you're scared of one player, and I really think that Micah Parsons is that ingredient. I've never had any, 2 guys playing together, Trayvon Diggs and Micah Parsons, to see how long they're going to play together. But there's so much ferocity. I think people, they give enough credit to Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy, they had that bad experience with Mike Nolan. That was a train wreck. Go out and hire Dan Quinn and just turn this defense around. And now you got these players just balling and having fun. And I don't care. Cooper Rush has been a tremendous backup guy. I don't think anyone has really expected this, but it's a lot. It has a lot to do with how great they're playing on defense, because no team, when they get behind and they have to throw the football right now by watching this Cowboys, they don't have a chance. And that's just because of different personnel, the depth, and guys that we haven't heard about, the Dante Fowlers, young guys like Sam Williams, Neville Gallimore, Bohan. I mean, there's all guys that are out there balling, because collectively there's been one player that's really kind of united that and really just kind of been the pulse of that team. And I think it's been amazing to go on this run with a guy that, you guys know this. You know how Cowboy fans are. It's a winning. If you're not winning, we don't got time for you. When I lost the first game of the season, the football sky was falling. Like, it's done. Dak's gone. And then Cooper Rush comes in there, and he just does exactly within himself, makes plays. But, man, the defense, I'll tell you what, every time I watch it, it makes me feel like a proud father to watch a defense play like that. And, there's a test. These next 2 games, they got the Rams on the road, and they got the Eagles. So we're going to find out a lot about them. But, man, I'll tell you what, if they keep playing like this, they're going to have a chance to win a lot of games, regardless if they have Cooper Rush or Dak Prescott.
Tony, as always, thank you. You still have the podcast, correct? Is that people can dial that up?
Yeah, just so you can then also follow me on Instagram, TC Casillas, and then on Instagram, that's on Twitter. On Instagram, follow me there. I do a Tony's Take every Tuesday. It's a live interaction, comments, questions. So yeah, you can hit me up there.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate it as always. Great insight, Tony Casillas, Hall of Famer, College Football Hall of Famer, former Cowboys and Falcons, defensive lineman.
Yeah. One thing that I did not ask Tony there, but he had mentioned it on Twitter.